Hi, I'm Dan, and welcome to Polar Currency in video number 61, my top 10 large size $5 banknotes, the final five countdown. There's one or two notes that may surprise you, and a couple that I'm sure a few of you are expecting. That's if I have the note. You're just going to have to wait. Like I said in video number 60, part 1, it's an eclectic list with a lot of history to some beautiful banknotes. Okay, we're going to start with a review of the notes 10 through 6 before we get into the countdown. Coming in at number 10 was the Porthole note, Series 1923, the last $5 silver certificate issued. Number 9 was the 1861 Arkansas War Bond or Confederate note with almost all the coupons. Number 8 was the 1933 5 pesos, the Gypsy note, and the first currency design issued from the Bank of Mexico. Number 7, the famous wood chopper, the Series 1907, and the last large-size $5 legal tender issued. And rounding out the bottom 5 is the 1857 obsolete banknote from the Nemaha Valley Bank of the Nebraska Territory. 7 politicians on one banknote. That might be a bit much. That's it for the review, and on to the top 5 large-size banknotes in my collection. Number 5. The Federal Reserve Act of 1913 authorized the very first $5 Federal Reserve note, FRN, with the Series 1914 that started with a red seal. The seal was changed to blue in August of 1915 after only 4 months of production. The reason? The dry ink colors came from Germany and World War I had broken out and the shipments became sporadic. Both red and blue ink were in short supply, but the change was made simply because there was more blue ink. This does make sense because the red seals are exceedingly rare and more costly. I'm lucky enough to have both, and they're Friedberg numbers 840A and B, of course from Minneapolis. Being the first $5 FRN and the seal color change is why this note makes my top 5. The note bears the portrait, of course, of Abraham Lincoln, who previous to 1914 had appeared on 7 different note types in 5 denominations. The 1914 FRN portrait, engraved from an 1864 Matthew Brady photograph, was first used on the Series 1869 $100 Rainbow Legal Tender note and last used on the Series 1995 $5 FRN. The face design is considered plain by large-size banknote standards, but the same design components basically remain the same for the $5 bill today. The reverse designs for the Series 1914 FRNs brought out a new style with 2 vignettes flanking the left and right, with the exception of the 100. The 10, 20, and 50 all had brand new vignettes, but the 5 incorporated recycled artwork. Columbus in sight of land is on the left, and the landing of the Pilgrims is on the right. The Columbus vignette first appeared on the Series 1869 $1 legal tender rainbow note front, and the Pilgrims previously landed on the reverse of the original Series 1863 $1 national banknote and the Series 1902 $5 banknote reverse. It's beautiful artwork, but why the 5 got reused vignettes is kind of disappointing. Number 4. There could really only be one reason why the Series 1899 silver certificate made my top 5 list, because it's just so cool. I could stop there, but you know I'm not gonna. First is the nickname, the Chief. The note is classic American Wild West for the time period, not politically correct today, but hey, that's history. The portrait is of Chief Running Antelope of the Hunkpapa tribe, which is one of the 7 council fire tribes of the Lakota Nation. Fun fact sidebar here, this was not the first banknote to feature a named Native American. That goes to the original Series 1863 $20 national banknote reverse that depicts John Gadsby Chapman's 1840 painting titled The Baptism of Pocahontas. And Pocahontas is the only Native American to actually have her name printed on U.S. currency. End of sidebar. In 1872, Running Antelope was invited to Washington, D.C. by none other than President Ulysses S. Grant, and while he was there, he had his photo taken by Alexander Gardner. In these photos, he's wearing his traditional Hunkpapa headdress. Fast forward to 1898, and this is the image selected for the new Series 1899 $5 silver certificate. Now, this is a bit of legend here, but the story goes that engraver GFC Smiley found the eagle feathers on Running Antelope's headdress too tall to fit properly for the note's portrait area. So he changed the Hung Papa headdress for a Pawnee one. The story continues that the headdress change caused ill will among the tribes of the Great Plains. One, because it was incorrect, and two, a bit of irony here, is that the Lakota Hung Papa tribe were enemies of the Pawnee. Apparently the engraver Smiley wasn't aware of this, or in my opinion, he probably just didn't care. It looked more Indian, and that's all that mattered. Nonetheless, the note is still impressive with Chief Running Antelope and the amazing blue serial numbers, Treasury seal, and the decorative number overlaying the Roman numeral 5. The reverse is typical for the time period, with the shift of covering the entire reverse in ink to creating white space to display the security threads. Certainly have to appreciate the detailed engraving work. This note not only makes my top 5, but is also ranked number 10 in the book 100 Greatest American Notes by Q. David Bowers and David M. Sundman. Number 3. The 1863 legal tender note ranks high for me because historically it is the first federally issued U.S. $5 banknote. The 1862 and 1863 series were the first banknotes to actually circulate as currency and could be considered an emergency banknote issue. More on that later. Mine is Friedberg number 63 and is a bit worn, but exactly the type of note that I look to collect for my low-end budget. It certainly has seen some circulation, but the eye appeal is still there, at least for me. The note features an adaptation of the 1835 John Francis Eugene Prudhomme portrait of Alexander Hamilton, one of the founding fathers and the first Secretary of the Treasury for the United States. On the left side is the Statue of Freedom by American sculptor Thomas Crawford. The statue was commissioned in 1856 for the new domed Capitol building that was approved by Congress in 1855. The statue looks small but stands over 19 feet 6 inches and weighs 7.5 tons. The statue didn't sit atop the Capitol until 1863, but was displayed on the Capitol grounds until the installation. The reason the 1862 and 1863 legal tender notes technically could be considered an emergency currency issue is because the U.S. government was going broke. No one had predicted that the Union Civil War costs would be so high so fast. The cost was staggering. Here's a rough comparison estimate. In the 1850s, federal expenditures averaged roughly $1 million a week. By comparison, by mid-1861, the cost of conducting the war alone was $1.5 million a day, and by the end of the war it was $3.5 million per day. The U.S. needed a funding mechanism and fast, and legal tender notes were issued, but not without great debate. The population could use these as circulating currency because gold and silver were being hoarded, and the government could use them to pay the mounting war costs. There's so much more to the story, but if not for legal tender notes, the Union would have run out of money. The ironic thing here is that the Confederate government was even in worse shape. Think about this. What if both the Union and the Confederacy didn't have the funds to wage war? What do you think would have happened? The 1863 reverse is actually the second version. The legal obligation language was changed. Aside from the detailed gouache printing, it's typical for the time, and you'll see that coming up on the next note. The note was designed by the American Banknote Company and ranks number 32 in the book 100 Greatest American Currency Notes. Number 2. The next note is the $5 State of Louisiana Obsolete banknote issued on January 28, 1867. This note ranks high on my list because it's a beautiful note with the cotton and wheat bordering the left and the two maidens flanking the center denomination block and the detailed green underprint. But what makes this note fascinating to me, it has the portrait of the 17th President of the United States, Andrew Johnson. Johnson is ranked as one of the worst U.S. presidents. For him to be on any form of currency is, well, bewildering. In my opinion, the man doesn't qualify to be on a wooden nickel. This series of notes were issued in $5, $10, and $20 denominations under the provisions of the State of Louisiana Act of February 9, 1866. Can you see which president doesn't belong? I mean, Andrew Johnson with the likes of Jefferson and Washington? Really? Anyway, I digress. The notes could be either circulating currency or, at the bearer's choice, be converted into state bonds earning 6% interest. It's not clear why these notes were issued by Louisiana, but probably they were facing a money shortage in the days immediately after the Civil War, much like almost all the other southern states. The reverse is another reason why this note is near the top of my list. It actually has one. Most obsolete banknotes are uniface, but this American Banknote Company issue has a design that's very similar to the original Series 1862 $5 legal tender note, probably because they were both designed by the American Banknote Company. Remember, the BEP didn't quite exist yet and was known as the National Currency Bureau, which wouldn't have their own engravers until 1863. You can also see that this note was redeemed with the cut cancel in the middle of the note. Andrew Johnson was a terrible president, and kind of a terrible person for that matter, and that's kind of the reason why this note ranks so high for me. Number 1. If you watch my video Top 10 Large Size 1s Part 2, my top pick won't surprise you. It's the Series 1918 $5 Federal Reserve Banknote, FRBN. For the same reason the Series 1918 $1 FRBN, the Flying Eagle, ranked number 1, the same goes for the 5. The design just stands out from all other notes, at least for me. I'm not going to get into what an FRBN, just know this, it's not a national banknote. If you want to know more, check out my video, What Are FRBNs? See the link below. The first reason I like the design because it doesn't have a hard border around the portrait, and I prefer notes when the portrait is off-center. It's just a visual thing. Here's the second part. I'm a huge fan of the large, stylized Federal Reserve bank block in the center. Don't know why, I just am. Third, the blue scallop seal on the right balances well with the portrait on the left. To me, the design has a place for everything. Even with 4 signatures, everything just fits. It's just a well-balanced design. The history of the large-size FRBNs is a tangled and fascinating story, and probably this is why they rank so high for me. There were 2 different series, the 1915 and 1918. They were a failed attempt by the U.S. Treasury to replace national banknotes. The creation of FRBNs involved unscrupulous silver mine owners, questionable politicians, a U.S. Treasury fire sale with silver, World War I, and the minting of both the 1921 Morgan and Peace silver dollars. It's because of the history combined with the design of Friedberg number 799 that makes this my number 1 note, and we haven't even gotten to the reverse. Well, we actually have gotten to the reverse. It's the exact same design as the Series 1914 $5 Federal Reserve note, with the exception of text changes. The vignettes are identical with Columbus and sight of land on the left and landing on the Pilgrims on the right, yada yada yada. The difference is the note text below the top center denomination and the legal obligation is different. So we've been there, done that. Doesn't take anything away from this being my number 1 $5 large size banknote in my collection. Well, that's it for video number 60, my top 10 large size $5 notes. 11 notes that include 1 world banknote, 2 Federal Reserve notes, 2 legal tender notes, 1 Federal Reserve banknote, 2 silver certificates, and a couple obsoletes. Like I said at the beginning, it's an eclectic group. I hope you enjoyed this top 10. When I started the list, I didn't think it'd be that good of a video. But with 3 notes in the book, 100 Greatest American Currency Notes, and some new history that I learned, it's actually been my favorite so far. As always, I appreciate your time, and if you like what you see, please hit the thumbs up button. Feel free to subscribe to the channel, and you know what? We'll see you in a few weeks. Thanks for checking in.